What Hamas does not like with this deal itself is that this is a 60-day pause, not the end of the war. And so, more importantly, it gives the Israelis and the Netanyahu government an opportunity to resume the war if everything goes awry. So that's part of what Hamas does not like at all. And so this is part of the back and forth that goes with all of this. The reports that came out after the deal was said to be accepted, that Netanyahu would accept this proposal, was that Hamas, through interlocutors, told the BBC that they are not accepting the deal. Now it's back on the table. Now the onus is basically all on Hamas. Hamas is feeling the pressure. Let me say that they don't want to be blamed or pegged that they are not the ones who are refusing the deal because they would like to be seen as actively working and being being a team player with the United States and with the interlocutors, with the Qataris and with their other allies. So this is kind of where it's coming from. And on the flip side, also worthy of note, the Minister of Defense, Israel Katz, made a point saying that if Hamas does not accept the deal, this is the last straw. Israel is going to come in with everything they have, and they are going to go in to annihilate Hamas, whatever is left of Hamas. So that's part of where things are in this current state. But as you said, things are slowly coming in, and there's a lot of back and forth. Nothing is confirmed yet.
How difficult is it to really kind of negotiate that and figure out what is fact and what is fiction?
Well, that's the biggest issue, and you and I have discussed this throughout the whole duration of the war. I mean, the problem that I see first and foremost, look, we're negotiating with terrorist organizations. The fact that we are putting them or leveling them up to a point of a legitimate negotiating party around the table. Now, they're not directly involved. This is done through interlocutors, the Egyptians, the Qataris, and others, but they're still trying to pull the strings in all of this, and they're getting the legitimacy of having this debate. And this conversation. And so it's hard to trust anything you say. It's really, about how much pressure can you put on Hamas. The bigger question that needs to be looked at very carefully, and this is something that you and I have discussed for months now, is what does the day after tomorrow vis-a-vis Gaza look like? And in its current configuration, and there's still no answer to that question, Israel cannot afford to leave the Gaza Strip because they cannot guarantee the safety of their citizens in the south in the current configuration. They cannot trust Hamas for obvious reasons, Hamas being a barbaric Islamist terrorist organization. The Palestinian Authority is weak, run by an octogenarian who also supports Hamas's actions at large. And so there's a fundamental question about the entity that is going to make this happen. For over 30 years, and even prior to that, the Israelis have been engaged in attempts for what has been defined under the rubric of a two-state solution, conversations about peace in the Middle East. This is not really a reality today. The two-state solution is dead. And so there's really nobody to have a conversation with. And unless Israel can ensure and guarantee its safety, for the past 20 years, the southern community of Israel has been suffering, which is what we saw in the crescendo happening on 10/7, then they have to stay there, at least militarily. But here, it's an objective of first getting the hostages back and then dealing with this reality. And that's been a lot of the domestic pressure that you're seeing coming out of the hostage families and inside of Israel. And of course, the mounting evidence that we have out of released hostages that we know about the amount of literal suffering that the hostages are going through. Torture, psychological torture, physical torture. These people are being shackled in the dungeons of Gaza. And so there's a lot of pressure to release them as soon as possible. His brother, Mohammed Sinwar, was one of the last leaders of Hamas. He was the one who was carrying the mantle after Sinwar's after the taking out of Sinwar. And so they are scrambling for leadership. Hamas on its social media and other places is saying that they're talking to other quote unquote factions within Palestinian society. Those are other Palestinian terrorist groups like Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigade, and other kind of groups that are ideologically on the same page. There's no guarantees. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Israel cannot live with this terror entity that is their next door neighbor. The biggest challenge is really how do you disentangle whatever is left of the civilian population when inside of Gaza, and how do you disentangle that population in safe zones, which Israel has been successful in that regard, and from Hamas itself. And so these are all part of these major challenges. The biggest problem is, and again, for Hamas, from the Hamas narrative, to your earlier point, they got nothing to lose. All they want to do, and this has been their objective from the beginning of this war, is to come out of the tunnels and say, we survived the war, we're still here, and now we are going to govern the area as a legitimate political players in this arena. And that would be seen as a failure for the Israelis, which is where the pressure is coming from. I mean, from my perspective, Israel needs to, and Israel has had support from the Trump administration, they got to come down on them like a ton of bricks to basically come down and say, pressure is coming down. If you don't, then all hell will break loose. I mean, that's what Trump said to begin with. The question is the limits of this quote unquote diplomacy that you're engaging with Hamas.
My last question for you. What role do the mediators play? Because we know that Qatar and Egypt were considered to be mediators here, but the U.S., I guess, really also is, because we're talking about a U.S. broker deal that was put together by Steve Witkoff.
Coaches, if you're thinking of building a website to get clients, that's one of the worst.
And that's really important. So right before Trump's visit to the region, as you and I have discussed before, Eden Alexander, the last Israeli American, was released. That was done directly by the United States, by Adam Boehler and Steve Witkoff through direct negotiations or quasi-direct negotiations with Hamas. It was said and reported later that Sua Arafat's late wife, wife was the one who was involved in some of these negotiations. She's based out of Paris. And Qatari is a mixed bag. I mean, Qatar, let's not forget that the Qataris have been responsible all along. They've been one of the major patrons of 10-7, yet at the same time, they're acting as good faith interlocutor negotiators. Trump, of course, was just in Qatar. There's a lot of trying to play it both ways. But let's not forget that much of the incitement and a lot of what's happening on American college campuses is funded by the Qataris. So you got to take it all with a grain of salt. I think that there is a pressure that's coming in as far as how much leverage does the U.S. actually have as far as economic incentive, as far as military incentive, as far as Trump actually controlling the actions vis-a-vis his conversations with Netanyahu. He is managing a lot of what's happening behind the scenes, and that's what he can leverage when he's talking, when Witkoff and Boehler and others are talking to the Qataris and to the Egyptians. They're holding the Israelis at bay. And so I think that that's part of what they have in their toolbox. That being said, I think that there's also a question of incentives as far as what the U.S. may offer economically in the post-war reality or the day after tomorrow scenario, which of course we're not there yet, but I'm sure those are used as carrots